Now to November 1987 and issue 46 of Crash. This time Crash had snuck in another price increase, up from the usual £1 to £1.25. It's hard to believe it was 75p when it first came out. The cover this month represented the game Rampage, previewed but not reviewed. It was a bit of a pre-Christmas lull with only one Crash smash. Let's run through the top 10. In 10th place this month with 67% is Arena, originally produced by Lothlorien but now re-released by Bugbite. This is a budget re-release of a game that came out in early 1986. It's a strategy and arcade crossover, with the arcade game being based on Battlezone. Philippa Irvine compared the arcade aspects with Quicksilver's Battlezone reviewed back in issue 11, although not reaching the top 10 in that issue. She described it as not quite as slow as that, but certainly not lightning fast. Although she found the presentation to be attractive and pleasant, she certainly did not find much depth to the game, although called it reasonably entertaining. By this point, a few older games had started to be re-released on budget labels. Of course, the challenge with that is, with few exceptions, the older games do feel primitive in comparison to modern titles. Arena's no exception, and in fact for a game that came out in 1986 really feels like it should have been from 1984. Both strategy and arcade sequences feel sluggish, and neither of them feel particularly original. I can't say that this is a game worthy of much time unless you're particularly a Battlezone fan. In 9th place is Trantor, The Last Stormtrooper from Go. In this side-scrolling arcade game, you play Trantor, abandoned on an alien planet. Your mission is to find 8 computer terminals and get a code word to escape the planet. Mike Dunn praised the presentation both of the title screen and in-game. Although the graphics were large, he criticised the amount of colour clash. But on the whole, he found the game unplayable and hence unaddictive, being more of a demo than an actual game. He scored this 52%. Bim Wealthy made similar criticisms, liking the graphics but finding the game tedious. He gave this 68%. Paul Sumner was more positive, liking the graphics and presentation, but finding a lack of variation to the game. He felt it wouldn't have lasting appeal, but still scored it at 82%. This gave an average of 68%. Although the backgrounds look like they've been created with a great deal of polish, the game itself feels decidedly less so. From minor things such as the music stopping when you make a selection on the main screen, to the just general lack of animation smoothness in the game, it feels rough around the edges. The fact that you can't shoot whilst jumping makes the game almost impossible. Your character is very large in proportion to the playing area, somewhat reminding me of Gift from the Gods or Sacred Arm of Antiriad. Here it just makes him easy to get hit by the antagonists. This is a game that feels like it had potential but just doesn't really live up to it. In 8th place we have a pair of text adventures released on one tape and available through mail order. These are The Prospector and The Crown of Ramhotep from Tartan Software. The Prospector is set in the Wild West of 1849, with you prospecting for gold. In The Crown of Ramhotep you have travelled to Egypt to assist an archaeologist with retrieving a fabulous treasure. Derek Brewster called The Prospector a smart enough quad game, with reasonable graphics, although he did feel the font was a shade too modern. Although finding the plot somewhat obvious, the nitty-gritty of the game was surprisingly convoluted. The Crown of Ramhotep he found similar in structure, style and quality. He couldn't wholeheartedly recommend the games as they weren't novel enough, but he found them competent. He scored them at 71%. The Prospector feels like a typically quilled game, the custom font is reasonable, and the graphics, although fairly basic, appear in most locations. It does a reasonable job of representing a Wild West style town, although giving you only $10 to start with and having every single item costing $10 seems like a bit of guesswork is needed. The game is adequate but nothing groundbreaking. The Crown of Ramhotep is similar in presentation with basic pictures once again, this time set in a modern Egyptian town. I find this doesn't quite have the atmosphere of The Prospector, but it's another reasonable game if you're a text adventure fan. In 7th place is Mystery of the Nile from Firebird. In this game you take the role of archaeologist Nevada Smith, I wonder where they got that name from, and his assistants. You battle the henchman of Abu Sal, who has stolen the Jewel of Luxor. Richard Eddy described this as graphically detailed and found it playable, although frustrating. He called it a relaxing alternative for the hardened shoot-'em-up fanatic and scored it 72%. Paul Sumner said the game had a hot and sweaty atmosphere, although was positive about the way in which it avoided colour clash. He found it had character, although doubted its lastability. He rated it 70%. Nick Roberts, on the other hand, called it a fantastically addictive little game with cute graphics and really good tunes, although confusing at the start. He gave this 80%, resulting in an average of 74%. It's the second Egyptian themed game this month, and I'm even less impressed by this one. Although it starts with a reasonable tune, the game just seems odd. It's not entirely obvious what you need to do even after reading the instructions, and as you seem to need to start by jumping from a hotel window, it all seems very strange. I don't know if the game gets any better after the first screen, but I wasn't impressed at all, and won't be coming back to find out. In 6th place we have Dizzy from Codemasters. You play Dizzy, an egg, with a quest to scour the land to find ingredients for a potion to defeat the evil wizard Zax. Nick was very positive about the game, praising the excellent animation and brilliant graphics. He summarised it as addictive and neat, giving it 85%. Ben found the main character a little too cute and cuddly for his liking, but found the game fab, calling it one to have in your software collection. He gave it 77%. Richard described this as an appealing game with enough puzzles to keep your interest going for a while. He summarised it as a worthy product, but only scored it 72%. The average of all scores was 78%. The Dizzy series of games is one I remember fondly, and have been looking forward to getting to throughout this series. Although the first is undoubtedly the least polished, and it's frustratingly easy to get stuck in places, it's still got many of the features that made the later games great. Although having minor colour clash, and sometimes relying on pixel-perfect jumps, this is one of the definitive Spectrum Arcade Adventure series, with a graphical style that created a real atmosphere. Ben and Richard really underrated the game here, maybe not quite worthy of a Crash Smash, but it should certainly have scored in the mid to high 80s. One that you should check out if you're an arcade adventure fan. In 5th place is another game from Codemasters. This is Professional Ski Simulator. As the title suggests, this is a simulation of skiing, for 2 players or 1 player against the computer. Nick felt the simulation was so good it was just like being on the slopes. He liked the detail, although criticised the way in which the screen would scroll on if the player was too slow. Nevertheless, he gave this 87%. Robin liked the sense of 3D created by the shading, although found that it takes a while to get the hang of the game at first. Although an enjoyable game, he felt it offered little to long-term interest, and rated it only 71%. Only 2 reviewers played this game, so this averaged 79%. Somebody's got to say it, Horace Goes Skiing was better than this. It's got a good title tune and may be very detailed graphically, creating the atmosphere of a ski resort well, but the game just isn't fun. It's not easy to control effectively, and the limitation of only having one view is that as soon as one skier gets ahead, the other can't see what they're doing. Not a game I enjoyed, and not one I could recommend. In 4th place is Future Tense from Mystic Software. This is a text-only adventure written with Girlsoft's professional adventure writer. It's set in the year 2239, with you playing the role of an agent for the Society of Human Preservation. Derek liked the clever title and concept, and praised the friendly and welcoming writing style, contrasting with a rather dire view of the future. He didn't really give much more of a critique, but scored the game from 83% to 85% in all categories, with an overall score of 85%. It's another text adventure set in the future, although it's a shame this is text only. Despite the lack of graphics, it's presented well, the font and use of colour being nicely done. It appears to have made up for the lack of graphics by at least having sensible responses to the examine command. The story and descriptions are written well enough, a touch of humour without being a spoof. Pleasant enough if you enjoy adventures. Now we come to 2nd place, with 2 games in joint second this month. The first, from Incentive Software, is Karyssia, Queen of Diamonds. This is a text adventure developed with Incentive's graphic adventure creator. In this game your quest is to reach and defeat Karyssia, and allow rightful heir Laurenin to take the throne. Derek was positive about a number of features of this adventure, the crisp 3D pictures, magic, combat and story. He called the graphics Ultimate style, referring to the isometric approach taken. Although sparse, he felt that these gave the game an attractive appearance. He noted some quirks, such as certain items being automatically picked up when you encounter them, and L being short for load, not look. But on the whole he found it a fine adventure with many admirable features, particularly finding the plot held the attention marvellously. He scored the game at 87%. It's another text adventure. This one has graphics. Unfortunately, when the graphics appear you wish they hadn't. The pictures seem to want to create the impression of an isometric 3D game, and it doesn't really work. They also take up far too much of the screen space. When you leave the inside of the building and head to more interesting locations, the game tends to be text only. I found this game less impressive than Future Tense. Many sensible commands like look were not understood, and the game doesn't seem to want to be that descriptive. It's okay for yet another fantasy-based text adventure, but ultimately forgettable. Also in 2nd place is a game from Gremlin Graphics, this being Jack the Nipper 2. This is the sequel to the first Jack the Nipper game from issue 30. You play Jack, but this time you're causing mayhem in the jungle. Paul found this a superb follow-up to Jack the Nipper, although complained that Jack wasn't as naughty or reckless as in the former game, but he gave the game 88%. Richard found it graphically better than its predecessor, with so much to explore and discover. He liked the way you could play as a simple game or as an involved puzzle game and gave it 87%. Nick felt that it was a game that burst with addictiveness like the original, though thought that some ideas had been copied from other games. He found the colour well used and the graphics excellent, although the animation jerky. On the whole, a fantastic follow-up which he gave 85%. The overall average score was 87%. I know a lot of people prefer the first Jack the Nipper game, but I never quite took to it. This one I find far more appealing, with the colourful rendering of the jungle somewhat reminding me of 3 Weeks in Paradise. It may be a tad frustrating as you lose life just by touching an enemy, but at least you get a period of immortality for your next life. Back in the day I was more familiar with the Commodore 64 version of this game. The Spectrum version doesn't quite have the same atmosphere as that version, but nevertheless it's a good bit of fun. In first place we have this month's only Crash Smash. That's Thundercats from Elite, developed by Gargoyle Games. This is a 2D scrolling beat-em-up game based on the popular children's cartoon. You play Thundercat and must search for and take the Eye of Thundera, held by Mumra. Richard noted the hallmarks of Gargoyle's programming, the large, detailed and well-animated graphics. He felt it a game that would get easier after practice, calling it the best thing Elite had produced since Ghosts and Goblins. He gave it 91%. Paul had not heard of the cartoon, but said the graphics couldn't be faulted, and found the animation top-notch. He also gave this 91%. Mike summarised this as brilliant, with in-game graphics that are excellent in every respect. Although not expecting the game to be addictive, he found himself still playing the game 2 days later, and felt it had weeks of playability left. He scored this 92%, giving it an average score of 91%. Well, it's another side-scrolling beat-em-up type game. It bears some conceptual similarities to Trantor from this month, but is much better than that. It's also very similar to last month's Hysteria, although it doesn't really have the graphical polish of that game. I feel they could have worked harder on the scrolling. There are just so many better examples at this point in the Spectrum's life. I suppose it's not a bad game for a few minutes play, and Crash couldn't really have an issue with no Crash Smashes, so they needed to find something. This is not a game I remembered at all, and one I rarely hear people mention today. Good, but nothing special. If you have enjoyed this, please like and subscribe to see more videos about retro computing from Nor Logic Retro.